you should kill this person, maybe, kill this person, go on. God, the characters in this book. I'm gonna be wild and crazy. What the hell is going on? Hello, it's time for the September wrap-up, woo! So yeah, it's October, I read some books in September, we're gonna talk about them, and I have them all. I started my reading journal this month, and look at this, spoilers, but ooh, pretty. So yes, let's go. First book I read this month was After by Anna Todd, which, you know, could have picked a better choice, but you know, whatever. I actually buddy read this with Taylor and Isenia because we were like, look, second film's out this month, this will be fun. Spoilers, it was not fun. This book I gave 2 stars, and yeah, I was kind of hoping that it would surprise me because I'm definitely not shy to admit that I have a bad taste in books, and my romance tastes are my romance tastes, but I kind of thought that this would probably be one of those shameful, like, secret 4 stars. It wasn't. I was very disappointed, actually. This was just, the relationship was just toxic AF, and not my thing. It was always just like oh, we're arguing and now we're back together, and now we're arguing and now we're back together, and now we're living together and we're arguing, and it was just bad. And if you've read the book, or if you're familiar with how this book ends, choices were made, not necessarily good ones. Yeah, this book did not do it for me. Kind of disappointed. I shouldn't be disappointed, but I was. So yeah, 2 star, not good. Second book I read this month was Illuminae by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This book was so good. This was 5 stars, easy. Was my first ever sci-fi read, and I really was unsure, but I was drawn in by the multimedia, mixed media aspect of it. I don't have the first book with me right now, but like, see, you have kind of a lot of pictures and stuff going on, and there's a lot of, everything's pretty much told through like interview or some kind of text, and it took me a while to get into, like a couple of days, just because it was very different to reading a regular book. But oh my god, I'm so glad I read it. It was incredible. The story was perfection. The whole sentient AI thing, but also there's a virus, oh my god, and like there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of intertwining plots that at the start are all very separate, and you're like, what the hell is going on? But then once they start to kind of merge, you're like, oh no, okay, and now I see what's going on. There was a lot of that, and it was really well done. Also bloody emotional at times. Hit me where it hurt, and I wasn't expecting it to. But this was incredible and an instant favourite for sure, and I'm really excited to read the rest. Next up, I read The Roommate by Rosie Danan. This was an arc, and it is essentially about this girl who, she moves to LA. She's kind of like a socialite kind of thing. She moves to LA because she's like, I'm gonna be wild and crazy, and she plans on living with this guy who she's known forever, she's always had a crush on, and he ditches and leaves her with somebody else who he's renting out his room to. She finds out that he's actually a porn star, and she's very prudish, I guess. I hate to use that word, but she's kind of prudish, and she's like, oh my god, and then, you know, romance. I will say this book sounds a lot steamier than it is. It definitely has its parts, don't get me wrong, but I would just say don't expect full-blown pornographicness all over the page. But what I really liked about this book was the kind of sex positiveness of it, and the kind of discussion around the porn industry and the treatment of sex workers. That was really something that I really enjoyed about this book, and I thought it did quite well. It's quite educational in that aspect, so I would highly recommend it if that's why you're into it. It was a really good book. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I just wish the romance did a little bit more for me, but definitely a solid read. Next up, I read The Poppy War, and this was a buddy read with my friend Mika, who, Mika, if you're watching this, I know you're struggling with this book right now. As of right now, it's October 2nd, and I know you're struggling, but it's okay. I kind of left her in the dust with this book, but this was really good. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. This was very different for me. As I said before, I'm kind of getting into my adult fantasy and my kind of epic fantasy, I guess. Fantasy element of this book was really interesting, and yeah, it was very, I wouldn't, intense, kind of. So we start out with Rin, and she goes to this school to train, and then it very quickly shifts into a war book, and I'm kind of scared to read the rest of the books. But I'm definitely excited to read the rest of them. But also I would say this book is graphic in parts. There was one chapter in particular that I was like, I had to kind of put the book down for a second because it was graphic and very dark. But overall, a really solid book, and I'm excited to read the rest and continue my fantasy journey. Next up, I read City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare, which I'm not going to sit here and talk about for ages because we did a whole live show and you can watch that. Long story short, I didn't like this book. Shocker, we all know this. Didn't like it. Unnecessary. Should have left off as a trilogy and just moved on, but alas, here we are. Yeah, just nah. Continuing on the theme of bad books, next I read After We Collided by Anna Todd, which, look, I just like to suffer. And again, like I said, I kind of wanted to read the first two at least before the film came out. I ended up not seeing the film anyway because it's in cinemas in the UK. There wasn't one near me, and then we went into lockdown and wherever, but I haven't seen it yet. Second book, kind of worse than the first. Just more of the same back and forth nonsense, and it's like 700 pages long, and it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. I could read this book. This book I could easily condense to like 200 pages. This could be a novella because like nothing happens. It's just all arguments and the romance doesn't even make up for it because the romance I don't even enjoy. So I'll probably read the others. I mean, I'll definitely read the others at some point, but not impressed. Then I read These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which was also an arc. This was so good. I think I gave this 4, maybe 4.5 stars. And this is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in 1926 Shanghai, which, does that not just sound like the best setting for a book ever? It's just incredible. The whole actual like location of the book, but also the kind of retelling aspect. So good, so good. Yeah, highly recommend this book. I think it comes out in November or December, but it's really flipping good. This, it also has kind of like a fantasy monster aspect to it, which is really creepy. Yeah, this was definitely creepy, and you basically have this monster that's somehow in Shanghai, and you're like, wait, what's going on? And it's essentially causing people to tear their own throats out, which is grim. The only reason it didn't get a 5 was simply because it was a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but the romance kind of didn't really kick in until towards the end of the book, which was not necessarily disappointing, but just not really what I expected. So I kind of wanted a little bit more, but once it did kick in, it was really good. So yeah, this was a really, really good book, and when it comes out, highly recommend you pick it up. Next was another new favourite for me, because this month I had 3 new favourites. Oh, well, great month. And that was Playing with Fire by LJ Shen. As I said before, I read a lot of LJ Shen books this year, and this one was very different to any of her other ones that I've read. It was much more mature and handled a lot of difficult topics in this book, like, you know, grief and survivor's guilt, I guess, and caring for some a family member with dementia, and just a lot of difficult topics, but done really well. And the romance was great. It was kind of like a friends to lovers situation, which usually is not my thing. But again, in this one, it just did it for me. This book just, I don't know what it is about this book, but it just feels like, this sounds really probably kind of stupid, but it really felt like a golden hour in a book, like in terms of like the time of day, but then also the Casey Musgraves album, because this book is set in Texas, and then you kind of have the golden hour feel of this book, and I really just, Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves is my soundtrack to this song. This book is just so good. Highly, highly recommend. Then we had another new favourite, which was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This book was so good. So this book is not yet part of a series, and I think it's going to be a series at some point in the distant future, but as of right now it is a standalone, which was so good. Something that I just love about Sanderson's books that I've learned is just his world building is incredible. It's just absolutely insane how he can build a world really quickly, because as I said, this is a standalone book, and I think it's like 700 pages, which, you know, is like a sizable book, but it's not that big to build a whole new world in. But he just has this way of doing it in such a, it's just so good. And the magic in this book, I actually kind of preferred to Mistborn, which was surprising, because in Mistborn we kind of deal with metals giving you powers, whereas in this book it's all about colour and breath, and it's so good, so good. It's just incredible. It's just insane how quickly he can build a world and make me really love characters. Oh my god, the characters in this book, some of my new favourites, like Susabaron is an incredible character who is a soft king, literally. I love him a lot. Also Ciri and Vivenna, who are the two sisters in this book, badass bitches, love them. And then, this might sound strange if you haven't read the book, but there's also a sword in this book called Nightblood, who is a sword that can talk to you, and is kind of, he's not evil, but like he does just want to kill people, and he's always like, hey, you should kill this person, maybe, kill this person, go on, just chuck me in and let me at him. But like, he's also kind of cute. I love Nightblood, my favourite sword character in any book. And then I read Wicked Princess by A. Jade, which is the third book in a series that I started on Kindle Unlimited a few months ago. It was nothing special at all. There was, I don't know. There's not really a lot I can say about this book without talking about the other two books, but this one just didn't do what I wanted it to do. So the character that this was supposed from, so each book is based on a different character, and this one I had high hopes for, and it was really short, and half the book was not romance, and it was just not good. But I think there's another one coming out next month, so maybe that'll do it for me. Then I read Cause of Jaden Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is a Mayan mythology, Mexican folklore kind of based book, and tells the story of Cassiopeia, who basically is a servant in her family house and takes care of her grandfather, who is ill and old, and she's kind of treated like crap by everyone. And then her grandfather has this chest and this trunk in his bedroom that is always locked. She unlocks it, she sees this mound of bones that come together to form a person, and it turns out to be a god of death. And he essentially is missing, he's missing like a finger, an eye, a necklace, and something else, and she has to help him get them back so he can return, and if she doesn't, then she will die. Hunkame, I think is how you say his name, is the god of death that she awakens, and his brother is kind of the one who put him there and is trying to take over, and you know, that stuff. So Cassiopeia helps Tsunkame to try and recover his things, and yes, this book was really fun. Very different to anything I've read before. The only thing I didn't really enjoy was the kind of linearness of the plot. It was very A to B, and like it's like, oh, we need to go to this place, and then like they appear in this place, and there's not much development in between, which kind of sucked for me in terms of the romance in this book, because I've seen a few people talk about the romance, and I feel like it could be really good. It had the elements that I just love, but there wasn't enough development in it for me. It's quite a short book, which was kind of disappointing, but overall a really good read, and I do recommend. Finally, I'm counting this as a book, but I probably shouldn't, is The Way of Kings Part 1. So I've finished Part 1, which is the first half, which is this book. The paperbacks are split into two, and I finished the first part of The Way of Kings, which is the first book in the Stormlight Archive. So my goal was to catch up on the Stormlight Archive before the fourth book comes out, which is next month. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm still trying. So this is the first book, and there are two more, and they're all over 1,000 pages, which is insane to me still. But yeah, so I'm officially halfway through the first one. I'm really enjoying it. Again, Sanderson and his world building is just incredible. This one is kind of more difficult to get into than Warbreaker, because, as I said, Warbreaker is a standalone as of right now, so everything is kind of contained. But because this is building up for a really big, I think the final series is going to be something like 10 books, so it's really building up this massive world, and that's something I've never really read before, is a world that big and kind of expansive. So it took a while to get into. I'm really into it now. It was just kind of demotivating to be reading it. I'm reading it on my Kindle, and it's just kind of demotivating when you're reading for like 2 hours and you've gone up like 2%, you know? So I kind of had a bit of a crisis. So what I've done is I finished where Part 1 leaves off, and I've taken a break yesterday, and I'm going to come back to Part 2 today. But it's just so good. Again, the characters are great, and I'm really excited to see how the different plot lines are going to intertwine and the whole bigger picture of it. It's just so good. Something I also really like about this series in particular, which hasn't happened in the other Sanderson books I've read, but there are like illustrations in this book, it's kind of scattered throughout, and I think those are really fun because I love an illustration, and I'm just really enjoying it. Another thing that's kind of different about this book is, so it's split up into parts as was Mistborn, but in between each part there are interludes, which are like, I find really fun, and I'm really enjoying the interludes because they like really short little chapters in between about some other random character somewhere else in the world, and obviously connected, and it's just like, how are all these going to fit together? And it's just so good, and I'm really excited, and I'm praying I can catch up before Rhythm of War comes out, but like, don't count on it. But I'm trying. That's all the books that I read in September, which was, I think I read 12 books total if you count Part 1 of Way of Kings, but yeah, it was really good. I think what was interesting for me this month was a lot of the books I read were really big. I think most of the books I read this month were over 600 pages, which is insane to me, because if you told me this like even 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed you. But I'm getting good at my big books, and I'm not so scared of them anymore, which is a great thing. So yeah, this was a good reading month, and I thought, and I'm hoping October will be just as good. Yeah, so thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.